Good morning, secondary art students. We are having to do some things differently. I don't know if you've heard about the email that was sent out last week by the administration, but we are changing our schedule up just a little bit. This is the art history video for this week. I'm going to be posting the art history video on Mondays. That way you have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to get the questions finished. So I wanted to let you know that. Also, art history is only going to be required for grades 9 through 12. So if you're in an art class and you're in grades 9 through 12, you'll still do the art history. You can wait till Wednesday if you want to wait till Wednesday, but it'll be posted Monday, so you have the 4 days to get that done, along with your regular class project. What is going to become optional for grades 9 through 12 is the creative warm-up. You are welcome to do it. I will post the video, but you are not required to participate in the creative warm-up from this moment forward. Just the art history and the regular class project. So, art history. I was counting up the number of weeks we have left and wondering what I wanted to teach on that. And those of you that have art history with me in the past, we always kind of ran out of steam right when we were getting into some of my favorite time periods in art history. Impressionism is one of those. So I went kind of through our timeline, and what I've decided to do is sort of fast forward through a couple of periods that are very important in our history still. So don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't think they're very important. We're just not going to learn too much about them right now. We're going to sort of zip through and fast forward on our timeline. We ended with Rembrandt. We talked about Rembrandt last time, and chiaroscuro and the light and dark, and the Baroque period. Rembrandt was from the Baroque period, and the Baroque period kind of fades into what's called Rococo, which is a very kind of fluffy art for the aristocracy time period in art history. And then as a clash to that is kind of an abrupt change. Neoclassicism became popular, and artists like Jacques-Louis David and his very famous painting Oath of Horatii, or as Mr. Anderson would say, Oath of Horatii in Latin. Was a very famous painting. And Neoclassicism was kind of an abrupt response to that kind of fluff of Rococo. And after Neoclassicism, in the mid-1700s, we move into Romanticism, and that carries us through into the early 1800s. And Romanticism was a time of artwork being very passionate, and I don't mean in a romantic way, I just mean passionate about the subject, or trying to persuade people emotionally with the subject matter of the artwork, and that's the Romantic period. And we have artists like Caspar David Friedrich, Delacroix, Géricault. These artists were famous during that time period. But that's going to kind of be where I end with those three time periods and bring us into the mid-1800s. And the next four artists we're going to learn about in art history are kind of alive during the same time, mid-1800s through the early 1900s. And I'm going to start with an American artist, or who is considered an American artist, John Singer Sargent. He had American parents, but he spent most of his life in Europe. John Singer Sargent's father was an eye surgeon in Philadelphia, and his mother was kind of an amateur artist. And after the death of one of their children, Mrs. Sargent wanted to go on kind of a family vacation to Europe to grieve and get over the loss of that child. So they went to Italy, and that's where John Singer Sargent was born. And he also had a sister born over there too. And After they lived over in Europe for a while, she decided she wanted to stay in Europe, and so Dr. Sargent quit his job in Philadelphia, and they stayed in Europe the rest of their lives. For the most part, and they were called expatriates. That's what that means when you live in another country that's not your home country. But John Singer Sargent was born in Europe, raised in Europe, traveled all over Europe. He could speak many languages. He spoke Italian fluently, French fluently, German, obviously English, and traveled around visiting museums and things, and different historical, architectural discoveries and things like that to get his education. He was sort of homeschooled, if you will. And he always loved art. His mother encouraged him to draw and got him sketchbooks, and he drew a lot from nature. And he was talented at a young age. Most of our famous artists on our timeline were talented at a young age. And John Singer Sargent went to art school in Paris, of course the hotbed of art at the time. He studied Italian artists as well, since he was born there and spent a lot of time in Italy. So he had a good art history background and was accepted into the very prestigious Beaux-Arts school on his first try, which is pretty amazing. So he went to the Beaux-Arts school and got what we would consider classical art education. So he received his formal art training at the Beaux-Arts school in Paris, and it was very classical style of learning where you had a master teacher and you worked under them. And he did very well with that, but he also had some instructors that encouraged him to express himself and explore some of his own artistic ideas too. So he kind of got the best of both worlds. He got the classical formal art training and had encouragement to kind of do things his own way as well. But the money was in portrait painting. At the time, there was a lot of money to be made, and very wealthy people wanted to have their portraits done. If you've ever been down to Biltmore, down in Asheville, the Vanderbilts hired John Singer Sargent to do paintings for them, and other high society people throughout the world did the same thing. That's how he made a lot of his money, was commissioned artworks of painting portraits of people. But if you're ever down at Biltmore, there's a painting of Frederick Law Olmsted, the landscape artist who designed Central Park and also did the gardens down there at Biltmore. His portrait by Sargent is down there, and I believe there's one of the architect, Richard Morris Hunt. His portrait's down there, also done by Sargent. But John Singer Sargent made a lot of his money doing portraiture. Got to be very successful until what's called the Madame X scandal, and I'm going to let you watch the video, then you can tell me more about the Madame X scandal. After that situation, and he was debating about whether to even continue painting, he rubbed shoulders with some very famous artists by the name of Degas, Claude Monet, Rodin, the sculptor Rodin, and Whistler, the American artist Whistler. He had a good networking group of friends, and he dabbled a little bit in Impressionism and did some of his most beautiful paintings. There's one that the British have kind of adopted as their own, called Carnation, Lily, Lily, Rose. My other video is about that particular painting. It is one of my all-time favorites. So you get to see that. But Sargent left Paris and went to London. He still traveled all over Europe. He spent some time in Spain and fell in love with the Spanish music and just Spanish life in general and studied the master Diego Velázquez and his work, which inspired some of his own. But Sargent ended up dying in London, and he's buried over there in London in April of 1925. But he's most known as a portrait artist, but in reality he did over twice as many watercolors and watercolor paintings than he ever did portraits. He also did charcoal portraits, which my advanced art students are working on a master copy of a John Singer Sargent charcoal portrait. So famous artist, John Singer Sargent. Watch the 2 video clips and then answer the questions. Thanks.